I was sitting in bed, wrapped up in a blanket with my girlfriend, Emma. We both had glasses of wine in our hand, and were feeling really romantic. Emma had just told me she's 1 week pregnant with our baby. It was the best news of our lives. She came close to me and whispered in my ear, "I can't wait to spend my life with you, David." I smiled and held her hand. "And I can't wait for that, Emma. I love you." Saying this, I leaned towards her to kiss. We were both madly in love, and were sure that nothing could come between our fairy tale romance. Let me tell you beforehand, we were fools. While we were moving towards each other, something started banging our door loudly. Who could it be at this time of night, we wondered. The banging was increasing every second. We got out of bed and ran towards the entrance. Emma clutched me and held my hand out of fear. I went to the door and asked, "Who is it?" Before I could get an answer, though, the door fell apart. "It's the FBI, Mr. David. You're under arrest for getting rid of your ex-girlfriend, Skylar," an officer said. I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't know what to say except that I'm innocent. Skylar had passed away almost a year ago, and I had nothing to do with it. Emma tried to argue with the officers, but it was no use. I was immediately handcuffed, pushed in a car, and taken away to prison. At that moment, our lives changed forever. As you already know by now, I'm David. This is my story of how my ex-girlfriend came back from her grave to put a false accusation on me that got me locked up in prison. She made me bankrupt, homeless, and sent me on the most troublesome journey of my life. Luckily, this journey helped me get my name on the Forbes billionaires list and send my evil ex to the most dreaded place on earth, Guantanamo Bay. But that's for later. Before I continue, though, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any notifications about my incredible story. I was taken inside the prison by the FBI officers. There were dreaded criminals all around me in that multi-story building. They were all calling me names and trying to get their hands on me. The officer smiled and said, "Welcome to your new home, Mr. David." He gave me my prisoner ID, an orange uniform, and locked me up. I was officially a criminal now. From being in bed with my girlfriend to being in this prison, my life had turned upside down in just a few hours. Alone in the darkness of the prison, I remembered Skylar, the girl I had apparently gotten rid of. Skylar was my childhood crush and my ex-girlfriend. I met her because of my parents when I was 16. I didn't have a particularly great childhood because my family never treated me well. They were really rich, but they would force me to do manual labor jobs so they could buy more luxurious clothes and electronics for themselves. My mother wouldn't give me food for days to save money for her designer dresses. I would work on a construction site 18 hours a day on an empty stomach and come back home to see my salary being spent on ridiculous things. I dreamt of living like a normal teenager, going to a good school and studying instead of working all day. One day, when I came back from work, tired, I found the courage to tell this to my parents. But I had no idea that this would make them both extremely angry. They took me in a corner, and my mother forcefully took every penny I had in my pocket. As soon as she was done, my father kicked me out of the house and said, "Goodbye, son. You're useless for us now." My mother smiled and added, "If you can't give us money, we don't need you." Saying this, she shut the door tightly on my face. This is how, when I was just 16 years old, I became a homeless man. I spent my days living on the street in freezing weather without any food or water. It was a really rough time for me. With every passing day, it got clearer that I won't be able to survive like this for a long time. One day, seeing no light at the end of the tunnel, I lay down on a footpath, closed my eyes, and started waiting for the end. Thankfully, the light did come. In the morning, I saw a diamond ring in front of me. Who would give a homeless man such an expensive ring? I wondered. When I looked up, though, the answer was standing right in front of me. It was my neighbor, Skylar. She said, "As soon as I saw from my car it was you, David, I rushed here to help. I'm your neighbor, and we've been living on the same street for years. We can sell my ring to help you with money. I've always liked you, and it would be a huge loss if something happened to you, my dear love." That's the intensity with which I first met Skylar. She took me to her home, and soon we started dating. Eventually, though, her love turned into an obsession and we grew apart. She threatened to get rid of everyone I loved when I refused to be with her. But sadly, she died in an accident soon after. I wanted to go to her funeral, but I couldn't because Emma was unwell at that time. All I knew was I wasn't responsible for her passing away. With all these memories in my head, I drifted off to sleep. The next day, my lawyer told me that he can get me out of prison, but I'd have to pay $500,000 for bail. Was he kidding? I didn't have that kind of money. How the hell would I arrange $500,000? That's when my fate seemed clear to me. I'll stay in prison for years for a crime I didn't commit. Only a miracle could save me now. And luckily, that's exactly what happened. One morning while I was sleeping, the officer came to my cell and said, "Mr. David, your bail has been paid. You're a free man now." I got extremely happy. Emma did it. She somehow arranged the money to get me free. So I asked him, "Where's my wife? I can't wait to hug her and thank her for saving me." "She didn't come," he replied. "What? Who paid the money then?" I asked. "It's a beautiful woman with the name Sophia." I repeated the name in my head, but it didn't ring a bell. I didn't know any Sophia. The officer told me she's waiting for me outside. I came out of my cell with a lot of confusion. The officer pointed towards a girl. "She's the one who saved you, Mr. David." That girl had her back towards me and looked very beautiful at first glance. I walked towards her and said, "Thank you so much for the generous gesture. Without your help, I'd still be rotting in jail." She started laughing and turned to me. It gave me the biggest shock of my life. It was Skylar, the girl I had been accused of getting rid of. My ex-girlfriend, who had passed away 10 months ago in an accident, was standing right in front of me, alive. "David, you don't have to be so formal. If I'd known earlier that you were in prison, I would have given you the bail money a lot sooner." I couldn't believe she was alive and standing right here in front of me. I tried to touch her to be sure it wasn't a dream. "Calm down, darling," she said. "Sign your bail papers first, and then I'm all yours." But then I thought, why should I sign the bail? It was clear that Skylar is alive, and I'm an innocent man. I rushed to the officer and said, "Skylar's alive. She's standing right in front of you. You kept me in prison for no reason." "Are you out of your mind, young man?" he replied. "I've told you before that this lovely woman is Sophia." He showed me her identification card. He was right. It read, Sophia Harris. But she looked exactly like Skylar. What was happening? "Forgive him, officer. Prison does crazy things to people. Thank you for your help." Skylar held me by my collar and said, "Let's go, darling. Our lovely ride is waiting outside." She took me to the parking lot. A brand new Lamborghini was right in front of us. Unlocking it, she said, "I bought it especially for this day, baby. The day both of us get back together." She had always been rich because of her millionaire father. Buying a Lamborghini wasn't a big deal for her. "I've also ordered an unlimited credit card for you, linked to my dad's account. You don't have to do those petty jobs anymore, and you can stay home all day with me." Saying this, she showed me a brand new shiny card. But I didn't care about all this. I just wanted to know, what does she want from me? And more importantly, How is she alive? She pushed me in her car and locked the doors when both of us were inside. David, I have waited so long for this moment, me and you, alone. I can't wait for things to go back to the way they were. Saying this, she leaned in towards me to kiss me. I immediately pushed her away. Are you mad? I have a girlfriend now. Well, this made her really upset. She jumped in the front seat and started driving fast. Didn't you pass away 10 months ago? I asked. How could I have passed away leaving you behind? Do you see all these tattoos on my body? They're all the same word written in different languages. David. That's how much I love you. You are mad, Skylar. You always have been, I said. Sophia. That's who I am now. I faked Skylar's passing after you left me, hoping that it would melt your heart and you would come to my funeral with tears in your eyes. Then I would jump out of the coffin, tell you it was a prank, and we would live happily ever after. But you didn't come, David, she said with pain in her voice. Emma was unwell. I had to be with her, I replied. You stayed with that poor, filthy woman and ignored me completely? She said. Mind your language. She will soon be my wife. I know. I stalk you on all the social media apps after all. That's why I put you behind bars, darling. So you can't marry her. What do you want from me, Skylar? I shouted. I want you back. That's it. If you don't want to rot in prison and run from the police all your life, come back to me, David. I'll get the case withdrawn. This will save your life and, frankly, Emma's too. You know I can go to any extent to have you. Saying this with an evil smile, she slowly put the car to a halt and looked me in the eyes. David, no one can love you more than me. She put her hand on my shoulder and started moving towards me. I pushed her away with all the force I had. I don't like you, Skylar. You're a mad woman. I will never leave Emma for you. This time my words really hurt her. She had tears in her eyes. Don't call me mad for loving you, David, she said. Perhaps I made a mistake. You clearly don't love me. And love can't be forced after all. She put her head on the steering wheel and couldn't stop crying. I'm sorry, David. You can leave me here now and go to your home, she said with her face covered in tears. I felt bad, but there was nothing I could do. I had no feelings left for Skylar after what she made me go through. I got out of her car and walked away. I immediately started looking for a taxi to head back home. But that's when I realized my wallet wasn't inside my pocket. It had to be Skylar. She must have pulled it out when she was getting close to me. I ran to the car to get my wallet from her, but when I opened the door, she wasn't inside. The car was empty. Did she abandon her car and run off somewhere? I started looking around, but I couldn't see any trace of her. Suddenly, I heard this evil laughter behind my back. I turned around knowing it was Skylar. But before I could do anything, she forcefully tied my hands with a rope and blindfolded me with a black cloth. She pushed me inside the car again, fired up the engine, and started driving. I screamed and tried to get free. I wanted to go home, but Skylar kept driving. After an hour or so, the car came to a halt. I asked her, "Where have you brought me?" "It's my dad's private hotel, David," she replied. "Nobody stays here now because people think it's haunted. This is where both of us will be staying. I have found you after so long. We have to spend the night together." "I don't want to be with you, Skylar," I shouted. She pulled me out of the car and pushed me inside the hotel. My head hit the entrance door really hard, and I fell on the floor. While locking the hotel, she said, "You don't have a choice, my dear love.